what we need. You can take my mic.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so incredible responses from both of you guys here, and thank you again, Malik, and thank you, Mr. Coleman and Simi and everyone for having me here today. This is an incredible crowd and a very honorable, strong man that I can see here. I'll just start off by saying as well for myself, you know, it's really funny when you ask this question about grief. Something like when I was a kid, actually, when I was 14 years old, I made my first Facebook account, which still to this day, I've kept the bio with the same quote, and it says, "If you live your life without facing death, you die without ever having truly lived." So that was something that I remember reading that, you know, when I was 14 and I first made my account, and I'm like, you know what's like so funny about that when you talk about grief, like people think that, you know, death is supposed to be about loss and like, you know, hurt, and it's supposed to be very painful and sad and things like that, when in other cultures, death is actually celebrated, and it's like really actually seen as a symbol of transformation, because they know that you're moving on to something greater and something better. And so for me, look, I'm not gonna sit here and say you shouldn't be sad, you shouldn't experience that pain, you know, that comes with loss, because it is very painful, don't get me wrong. But when you've experienced it yourself by facing death, which when I say facing death, it doesn't mean you have to physically die, it just means that you're facing your own mortality, which is really the fact that nothing in this life is ever gonna be the same. We're always changing. Things are always continuously gonna be evolving from the outside world. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, how am I gonna evolve with it? Or am I gonna choose to stay stagnant and be the same how I've always been? And if you do that, you know, which I'm sure many of you guys, including myself, probably have, you know, felt like, okay, I just wanna stay in this comfort zone and I'm gonna continue to repeat those same patterns, you find eventually the same lessons that you have to keep learning over and over through different people and different experiences and situations, until you finally say to yourself, okay, enough is enough. I'm gonna continue to change how I move and think differently and act differently. So that's what I had to do for myself at that age, because I went through the same thing Benny was talking about, where you go through that identity crisis and you're wondering, like, what am I really here for? What is this whole life about? Like, why was I born, you know? And what was I made for? What is my purpose, you know? So I started asking myself those questions when I was 6 years old. And I remember times when I was like in the shower, just existentially having these thoughts about, like, you know, the concept of forever and time, and like, you know, because reading about it in the Bible, and, you know, when you die and you go to heaven, like, what is that actually like, you know? So I would ask myself those questions, and I still remember to this day the feeling of that, like, immense amount of fear of my own mortality, and like I couldn't sit with it, I couldn't confront it, it was like too much. And then when I tried to ask like my teachers or my parents or people around me, all of them, it seemed like I could just feel they didn't want to really address the question. Like, it felt like everybody had this layer of like a mask that they were putting on, where they were just like, you know, I don't have the answers and I don't really even know how to fully address them. So I'm just gonna continue to like do my daily motions of things that I can control, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I just, in myself, I'm like, this is not enough. Like, I need something more. I'm searching, and I know there's a better answer out there for me. So then when I got older and I experienced that loss for the first time, which was firstly the loss of my uncle from a drug overdose, which my whole, on the dad's side of my family, had been dealing with drug addiction for my whole life. And then I saw like firsthand how hard that was for my family and just him, and like dying at the, like in his 40s, you know, from something like that. He didn't even go outside the doctor's office to get those drugs. They were given to him. So it's like thinking about even how our own society has treated pain and addiction. Like, we're not really taught, like, as you know, David was saying here, we're not really taught to feel our emotions, to feel our pain. We're taught to just suppress them, and that's what we're given by the doctors. So like, when I experienced that loss, as well as the loss after having my first relationship and going through my first breakup, that heartbreak was another major loss for me. And so I went really deep within myself, and I started to ask myself those questions, like, you know, if I really am, you know, more than just this flesh suit, if I have this spiritual nature, like, what is it that I'm really here to do? And so that really charted the course to where I am now, where I've pretty much centered my whole life, not on what am I receiving from the external reality, because I know that those things could always be taken away at any moment. I'm basing my life and my actions and my thoughts on what is the ultimate purpose of why I'm here. What is that, higher power, whether you want to call it God or your higher self or the universe, nature, whatever. What is that higher power telling me that I need to do if I can quiet my mind enough to listen to it instead of just all the distractions from the outside world? So, without getting too much into it, that's really what I feel the most important thing for me and for what I could ever tell anybody when it comes to experiencing grief and how to move through it, is just to always come back to remember that there is this higher power, this higher plan that's there for you if you can just quiet your mind enough to listen to it. And what I wrote about my book is called Return to the Source. If you can return back to that source, that which created you, you can realize and remember your eternal nature. And that eternal nature, there's nothing in this external world that's ever going to help you tap into it. It's something you have to go on that internal quest to find. And once you start on that journey, you're gonna realize literally there's no limit to what you can achieve in life. And I've been able to sit in rooms with some of the most powerful, high profile figures on this planet just by doing that. And them, it's like an energy that I personally, that's the only way I could explain it, that when you tap into that energy, others can feel that, and it starts to open up doors for you that you never would have thought would have been possible. And I'll just finish with a quote from the Bible, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm not going to consider myself the type of Christian that just blindly follows whatever I'm told, but I think if you just sit with that quote and you think of Christ as an example of a figure of what it means to be a perfect human, and you just sit with that quote, anything can be possible when you tap in and you live your life from that place. So.
Absolutely. I appreciate you. I appreciate that response. And I think that resonates with some of everybody in the room, because everybody's gone through grief, and I think it's important that we speak further about, that grief isn't just relationship based. It isn't just when you lose someone to death. Grief can be the loss of a role, the failure of something that you identified with. Playing sports was big for me. So when I'm not playing football anymore, it's again, who am I outside of this? What do I do past this? And I think those feelings come, at heightened points in our lives, at heightened volumes based on what we're going through or how intimate we were tied to those different things or those people. So I appreciate those responses. The follow-up question I want to start and go back to Dr. Abrahamian is more on what would a process look like for someone to work through the anxiety, the depression, or the constant questioning of what their purpose is or how they should